In this presentation, we will pay payroll taxes. Note that we will not be using the paid payroll feature within this problem in order to pay the payroll taxes. We will demonstrate that in a future problem. The reason we are not here is because we want to work through this problem without having the added feature, the added paid feature of payroll, and we'll show that process without the paid payroll feature. Then in a future problem, we will add the paid payroll. If you would like to follow along with that with the paid payroll version, or if you just like to view through it, or if you're able to set up the manual payroll and can follow along in that format, then you can do that there. We will be entering this into QuickBooks Pro 2020, QuickBooks Desktop 2020. Here we are in our Get Great Guitars file. We currently have the Open Windows open. You can open the Open Windows by going to the View tab and then the Open Windows list. We're going to be focusing down here in the payroll information and the employee information. You'll note once again we don't have the paid payroll here. If you had the paid payroll, you would add the add-on over here. You can turn it on at any time, add the payroll. When you do so, you'll see another icon here and another arrow that will be going through it, as well as the processing of the payroll. If you would like to set up the manual payroll, which is a free version, which I don't recommend doing to actually process payroll for your practice, but is a good practice format if you're just practicing how to input the payroll into QuickBooks, then you can go through that process as well. We've gone through that in a prior presentation. It has some glitches right now, so it's not working smoothly. Therefore, we don't want to put it into this practice problem to confuse anybody. So our assumption here then is going to be that we have the payroll outside of, done by an outside service provider, third-party payroll provider. We have then entered the payroll using the third-party provider in the format of just entering the paychecks. Now we're going to be processing the payroll. So they would tell us in essence how much of the payroll taxes would be due. We would then pay it. If we were using the paid version, as again we'll demonstrate in a future problem, you would have an icon similar to what we saw for the sales tax to manage the payroll, which you can then pay in accordance with whatever payroll requirements you have set up for that. In our system, we have a third party, and you'll recall that when we processed the payroll, we went through it basically a payroll register, something that may be provided to us by a payroll company if we have a third-party payroll company. And you'll recall that the payroll register had the gross pay for our two employees, Adam and Erica. Then we had the Social Security, Medicare, and income taxes, federal income taxes withheld from their paychecks to get to the net pay. Then we also had to pay our portion of Social Security and Medicare. So this is the payroll that was processed for the month of January. We're going to do a similar kind of assumption that we're going to have to pay our payroll in the month after the payroll was processed. Again, this could vary depending on different circumstances of the type of payroll you have, what you're subject to in terms of when you have to make the withholdings and how often you have to make those payments to the government. Generally, for payroll, you'll generally have to process the payroll and then basically make the payment to the government fairly soon after that. In our case, we record the payments monthly for payroll, and so for the month of January, we process payroll. Now it's February, we owe payroll taxes for the payroll that was processed in January. That's going to be our process. Let's take a look at the financial statements then. So if we go back to our QuickBooks, we're going to go to the reports. We're going to go to the company and financial, take a look at the balance sheet. Down to the balance sheet, we're going to change the dates up top in the customized reports, where the dates will then be 01/01/20 to 12/31/20. That's January through December 2020. We're then going to say OK. So here is our balance sheet. Within the balance sheet, we note that if we scroll down, we have these payroll liabilities. Payroll liabilities would be there even if we had the paid payroll. It's just how we generate the payroll liabilities, similar process. If we go into the payroll liabilities, we'll see the detail for Adam and Erica, just as we saw in our register here. Here's the detail for those amounts. We have the amounts that were withheld from them, and that's going to be this amount for Adam, these three, for the 1,044. And we have the employer portion. The employer portion that we had to pay over and above as the employer at the 324. Same for Erica. So these are the amounts that we both withheld and the amounts that we had to pay in payroll taxes over and above. Now we're just going to basically pay those taxes at this point in time. Everything that is in there is in essence for the month of January, because we haven't processed February payroll. We won't do that until the end of the month. So we're just going to basically write a check in this format. Again, if you had to pay payroll, we would go back to the home page. We would have the processed payroll down below. We, in our scenario problem, have a third-party processing payroll. They now are telling us that we owe this money. We've entered the payroll process into our system. We're now going to pay the payroll tax liability that would be owed. So we're going to write a check then, and we're actually going to break this out into 3 checks. You'll recall on the balance sheet, we had the $1,598. We're going to break that into the 3 checks on the components of payroll that we have. So for example, we have Social Security of this, and that's the employee portion, and this. So we're going to write a check for Social Security of the 614. They all go to the federal government, but they're for 3 different reasons. Then we have the Medicare is going to be the employee portion and the employer portion, or the 340 or the 340.84, and then the income tax is going to be the 380. We'll write those 3 checks. If I was to add all of them up, that's going to add up to the 1598. That's the total liability that we owe. So we'll break that out into 3 checks. Going back over to our balance sheet, we're going to go to the Home tab. We're going to write a check, and we're going to write the check to the Internal Revenue Service. I'm going to tab through this. We're going to say it's going to be, the check number should populate automatically. We're going to take the date to be 02/28/20, 02/28/20. It's going to be going to the Internal Revenue Service. I have it set up, but you probably do not yet. So Internal Revenue Service. And if you don't have it set up, then go ahead and add it as you go. So you select tab. It'll say, do you want to add a new vendor? Add the new vendor. I have it here and then I'm going to then say the amount. Let's write the amount. We're going to break the amount out by the type of tax. So we have the Social Security tax first. We have the employer portion. I'm holding down Control, and the employee portion. The employee portion over here, the employer portion. That comes out to $614. So we're going to write the check for $614, first check by type of liability. Now we might want to put in the memo section as well, we might want to put payroll taxes, and we might put Social Security for January. And so it's going to go to payroll liabilities. So it's going to be payroll liabilities is going to be the liability account. Notice once again it says expenses up here in this tab. This is another circumstance where it really shouldn't be called expenses. It should be everything other than inventory, basically, that we need to write a check for. In this case, a liability that's going down. And then the amount is going to be, I didn't add the amount. It's going to be for that 614, 614. And so there's the amount. We probably want that same memo here. Then I'm going to make a new check. I'm going to say save and new, and let's do this again. And this is going to be, the check number looks good. We're going to say that looks good. And then the payee, once again, the Internal Revenue Service. This time we're going to make the payment for the Medicare, which will be the 77 employee portion, 77 employer portion, or 154. Going back over, we're going to make this be 154. Then we'll put the memo, which is going to be payroll taxes, and this is going to be Medicare. Let's just say January. And then I'm going to copy this memo. And notice it's already memorized the account. It's going to be to the same account. I'm just simply going to put in the memo section that it's payroll taxes for Medicare. Notice these are all going to the federal government, but they're for different things. Therefore, we're just going to write different checks for them. And so we're going to say save and new. And we'll do this one more time. And the next one is going to be for the income tax, or the employee FIT, federal income tax, 830. So let's do that one. I'm going to tab through this. We're going to say there's the check number's fine. There's that. Internal Revenue Service once again. We're going to say this is for the amount of the 830. So we're going to put the amount of 830 here and tab through. And this is going to be for payroll tax. And this is FIT, stands for federal income tax. I'm going to copy that. It's going to be a payroll liability. I'm going to put in the memo once again, FIT, federal income tax. So we're going to go ahead and save and close this. And let's see what happens to the balance sheet, which should be the payroll tax liability goes down and the checking account goes down. If we go to the balance sheet then, and we go to the checking account and scroll back down, we see our checks. Here's our 3 checks for the 614, the 154, and the 830. The other side go into payroll liabilities. If we close this back out and take a look at payroll liabilities, which is a liability type of account, we don't see anything here, I don't believe. No payroll liability there because it went to 0. We paid it all off. We don't have any payroll liability. Notice we only paid the payroll liability for January, even though we're in our practice problem the middle of February, and we have incurred payroll, but we haven't processed payroll yet. So we don't owe any payroll for February, even though people have been working for us and technically earning money, even though we haven't yet paid them. So we don't pay the February until March under this system. So we're going to go to the reports to try to find out that liability. I want to see the liability and drill down on that account with the zoom feature. To do that, we're going to go to the accounting and taxes and the trial balance. And then we'll change the date ranges from 01/01/20 to 12/31/20. And then we'll scroll back down and we have our payroll liability right there. There's the 0 balance. If we go into that by double clicking on it, we see the activity within it. And you see our 3 paychecks right here, bringing our balance back down to 0. Notice that we only have January activity. We haven't processed payroll for February yet, and therefore it goes back down to 0. Then we'll process February, and it'll go back up, and we'll pay it in March. So I'm going to close this back out. These are our ending balance at this point in time. You can check those numbers, see if you are tying out to them. Go back and make any adjustments if you need to. If you would like to push forward and there's a problem of any kind, or you want to push forward at this point forward in the problem, we will provide backup files so that you can restore and start at any point you would like, and basically just push forward from that point in the practice problem.